We all feel fear. But few ever question who benefits from it. Fear isn't just a feeling, it's a mechanism of influence. A lever. A mindset that has been used for centuries to shape societies, silence dissent, and steer human behavior without the need for chains. But what if you could see through it? In this video, we uncover how fear infiltrates your thinking, clouds your judgment, and quietly dictates your decisions. Drawing from the timeless insights of Niccolò Machiavelli, we go beyond the emotion itself and into the psychology that turns it into a system of control. And what you're about to learn isn't just theory, it's how people in power have controlled the masses for centuries. More importantly, you'll learn 5 psychological tactics that dismantle fear's influence over your mind, how to spot hidden manipulation, sharpen your critical thinking, build mental resilience, disarm division with empathy, and respond not with panic, but with power. Because once you understand how fear works, you don't just resist it. You master it. Fear has always been the most loyal advisor to power. Long before man wrote laws or raised flags, fear ruled, not through words, but through instinct. It was the original authority, etched into our nervous systems, whispering one command: survive. In its earliest form, fear was not complex. It didn't require language or philosophy. It lived in the body, the racing pulse, the tightened jaw, the instant readiness to flee or fight. It wasn't cowardice, it was nature's precision. This fear, primitive and raw, protected early humans from predators, harsh elements, and unfamiliar tribes. And so, from birth, the mind learned that fear was useful. And more importantly, it was powerful. But as civilization emerged, the role of fear evolved. No longer was it enough to be afraid of beasts. Now, man became the predator of man. Societies were built, hierarchies formed, and with them came a new kind of fear, social fear. The fear of exile. The fear of shame. The fear of being seen as weak or disloyal. These new fears weren't written in the body, they were carved into the soul. Here, Machiavelli understood something that others ignored: that fear, when used wisely, could build empires. A leader who wished to be obeyed did not need love, he needed control. And fear, unlike love, does not waver. It does not question. It submits. Social fear became the invisible chain that kept people in line. It taught them when to bow, when to speak, and when to remain silent. Institutions used it to preserve order. Religions used it to maintain obedience. Families used it to pass on roles. All under the guise of tradition, morality, or honor. But behind the curtain, it was fear, wearing many masks. And now, in the digital age, fear has mutated again. It no longer needs thrones or swords. It needs only a screen. A comment. A headline. A carefully edited image. Misinformation spreads faster than truth because it's designed not to inform, but to provoke. A frightened population doesn't ask questions, it clicks, it shares, it reacts. Algorithms have learned what tyrants once knew: fear captures attention. And in a world where attention is currency, fear is the most valuable commodity. Social media, once a promise of connection, has become a theater of control. Fear of missing out. Fear of being wrong. Fear of public shaming. Digital fear is subtle, it doesn't roar, it whispers. It convinces you to conform without command. It trains you to obey without threat. This is fear's final evolution, not as an enemy, but as an architect, quietly shaping thought, behavior, and entire cultures. Machiavelli never wrote about the internet. But he understood the principle: men are driven more by fear of punishment than by the promise of reward. And in an age where punishment is social isolation, digital outrage, or algorithmic invisibility, fear remains the ruling force. To master the world, one must first understand what it fears. But to master oneself, one must learn to see through fear and act anyway. Power has always known that fear is more persuasive than reason. But it's not just the fear of punishment that keeps people obedient, it's the fear of isolation, of irrelevance, of standing alone in a world trained to punish deviation. Modern fear isn't always loud, it's subtle, often disguised as concern, safety, or social responsibility. The pressure to conform doesn't come from tyrants, it comes from the quiet calculations of everyday life: what to say, how to act, who to agree with. And the most dangerous part? You start believing it's your choice. This is how fear evolves from external pressure into internal habit. You censor yourself before anyone else does. You nod, smile, agree, not because you're convinced, but because it's easier. Because invisibility feels safer than conflict. And little by little, you abandon clarity for comfort. But Machiavelli would call this the perfect submission, not forced, but volunteered. A population that polices itself is far more stable than one ruled by open violence. That's why fear isn't just political, it's personal. The battlefield is your own mind. And the only way out is to sharpen your awareness of how fear subtly bends your thoughts, choices, and values. Fear doesn't just protect us. It shapes us. The same mechanism that once warned us of predators now rewires our thinking in far subtler, and far more dangerous, ways. Today, we rarely run from wild beasts, but our minds still react as if we do. A vague threat, a harsh word, a shift in tone, and our reasoning collapses. We don't think, we scan for safety. And safety, when we're afraid, often means obedience. Fear hijacks perception. It narrows the lens through which we see the world, making uncertainty feel like danger and dissent feel like betrayal. Critical thinking shrinks. Risk evaluation skews. We overestimate threats, underestimate our power, and cling to the illusion of control, even when it's merely a leash. As Machiavelli observed, men shrink less from offending one who inspires love than one who inspires fear, for love is preserved by the link of obligation which, owing to the baseness of men, is broken at every opportunity for their advantage, but fear preserves you by a dread of punishment which never fails. He understood what most still fail to see: fear is more reliable than love because it bypasses morality. A terrified mind doesn't argue, it submits. That's why fear is so powerful in persuasion. From political campaigns to corporate marketing, fear is the most efficient motivator. You don't need to inspire, just threaten what people value: their safety, their image, their comfort. Suggest that their job is at risk, that they're not enough, that they'll be left behind, and you've already shaped their behavior. Not through force, but through illusion. Fear does the work for you. This tactic has been refined for centuries. Machiavelli didn't invent fear-based control, he merely exposed it. Today, it's algorithmic, personalized, weaponized. Social media feeds you fear in small, addictive doses. News cycles train you to expect catastrophe. The result? Chronic alertness. We live in a world where the amygdala never sleeps. And the cost is high. Fear, when sustained, becomes internalized. What starts as a survival reflex turns into a psychological prison. Anxiety disorders, phobias, and compulsive behaviors are modern symptoms of ancient instincts left unchecked. The body tenses as if attacked. The mind spins with imagined threats. The system burns out. Machiavelli never sugarcoated the reality of human nature, and neither should we. He wrote, "It is much safer to be feared than loved if one must choose." But what he didn't ignore is this: fear works best when invisible. The most dangerous fear is not the one we feel in a moment of crisis, it's the quiet one we carry daily, believing it's just part of who we are. Fear is a tool. But like any tool, it can either be wielded or resisted. In a world where manipulation thrives on uncertainty, and power often disguises itself in the form of protection, mastering fear becomes not just a survival skill, but a political act. For Niccolò Machiavelli, fear was not to be avoided, but understood, weaponized, and, when necessary, diffused. What follows are 5 psychological strategies not meant to soothe, but to sharpen. They won't teach you to avoid fear, they'll show you how to confront it, strip it of its disguise, and move through it with control. These aren't soft ideals or motivational fluff. They're hardened methods, forged in political fire, shaped by centuries of human behavior, and made urgent in an age where fear is engineered, monetized, and fed to us daily. First strategy is train the mind to question. Critical thinking is armor. Machiavelli understood that the public could be swayed not by truth, but by the appearance of necessity. Fear, when unchallenged, distorts facts into beliefs and beliefs into submission. That's why the first line of defense is intellectual, to think clearly even when emotion screams otherwise. In The Prince, Machiavelli writes, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." This is a lesson in optics, and in illusion. Those who wish to control others know how to manipulate appearance. But those who wish to remain free must learn to see through it. In today's world, that means developing the discipline to question how we know what we think we know. Who benefits from this fear? Who profits from my outrage? What assumptions am I making, and what information am I missing? To train critical thinking is to turn one's mind from a sponge into a scalpel. Learn to trace information to its source. Study the motives behind messaging. Observe the emotional hooks buried in headlines and speeches. Every time you resist the rush to judgment, every time you withhold belief until understanding is earned, you reclaim agency from fear's grip. And it's not just about information, it's about perception itself. Fear doesn't just distort what you think, it distorts how you think. It narrows your focus, collapses your options, and makes obedience feel like wisdom. Critical thinking reopens the frame. It gives you distance, not to detach from reality, but to see it with sharper edges. A questioning mind becomes unshakable not because it has all the answers, but because it refuses to be led blindly. Second is build emotional resilience, the sovereign mind under siege. Fear thrives in minds untrained to suffer discomfort. The modern world promises comfort at every turn, instant solutions, curated feeds, soft distractions. But comfort breeds fragility. The moment discomfort arises, a rejection, a crisis, an unfamiliar idea, anxiety floods in, and fear begins its work. But Machiavelli never promised comfort. He admired strength, adaptability, and the capacity to endure. Emotional resilience, in Machiavellian terms, is not about avoiding hardship, it's about withstanding it without losing control. To build resilience, one must first reframe fear as information, not as a verdict. What does this anxiety point to? Is it real or perceived? Physical or imagined? Useful or inherited? The resilient individual does not suppress fear, they interrogate it. Second, resilience demands exposure. Just as muscles are strengthened by tension, the mind is fortified by encountering what it fears, gradually, deliberately, without retreat. Whether it's public speaking, confrontation, or expressing vulnerability, avoidance fuels fear. Action diffuses it. Finally, resilience grows through ritual. Daily practices of stillness, such as journaling, meditation, or solitude, create an internal stronghold, a place untouched by external noise. In Machiavellian terms, this is your fortress. Not built of stone, but of self-possession. No ruler, internal or external, can command a mind that no longer reacts reflexively. If the content resonates, a comment, a like, or a subscription can help it reach those who need it most. In a world flooded with noise, signals of clarity are worth amplifying. Third strategy is master the language of fear. If you can name it, you can tame it. One of Machiavelli's most subversive insights was the understanding that power is not only about force, but about perception. If others believe you are powerful, that belief becomes reality. The same is true with fear. If you can define it, you shrink its shadow. This is the art of naming the enemy. Vague fears, failure, judgment, not being enough, control us precisely because they are undefined. Once fear is examined under light, it loses its mystique. The mind needs language to master emotion. Without articulation, we drown in fog. Journaling, philosophical dialogue, or guided introspection can serve this purpose. Ask, what exactly am I afraid of? When did it begin? Who benefits from me staying afraid? These aren't just therapeutic questions, they are political ones. Because fear, unnamed, can be exploited. But fear, named, becomes a tool you hold. But the most important shift comes later, when you stop just resisting fear and start turning it into advantage. In Discourses on Livy, Machiavelli states, "A wise man ought always to follow the paths beaten by great men and to imitate those who have been supreme." To imitate the wise is to learn how they name their fears and direct their action, not how they suppress emotion, but how they channel it toward power, not paralysis. Fourth, foster empathy, not agreement. Divide and conquer no more. Fear separates. It turns neighbors into strangers, opponents into enemies, the unknown into the threat. Tyrants throughout history, as Machiavelli chronicled, exploited this dynamic relentlessly. It's easier to control a population divided by suspicion than one united by understanding. The antidote is not blind agreement or forced unity, it's empathy. True empathy is not weakness, but strategy. It allows you to see the fears behind aggression, the wounds beneath arrogance, the confusion within dogma. This doesn't mean you accept manipulation, but you understand it. And once understood, you gain leverage. In politics, business, and daily life, the emotionally intelligent individual becomes powerful not by dominating every room, but by reading it. Machiavelli himself practiced this. His letters show a man attuned to the psychology of both allies and enemies, constantly assessing, adjusting, anticipating. To cultivate empathy is not to surrender, it is to expand awareness. The more minds you can enter, the less susceptible you are to the fear-based propaganda that depends on us versus them. You become harder to frighten and harder to divide. And here's the paradox: the more clearly you see others, the less personally you take their fear-driven behavior. Empathy doesn't make you passive, it makes you precise. It lets you step out of the emotional chaos and respond strategically. You stop mirroring tension and start disarming it. In a world where outrage is contagious, calm becomes a form of quiet dominance. Fifth strategy is practice strategic detachment. Control begins where reactivity ends. Perhaps the most Machiavellian of all strategies is detachment. Not indifference, but control. Fear manipulates by hijacking emotional immediacy. Someone insults you, you react. The news terrifies you, you believe. A threat emerges, you comply. The cycle continues. But what if you don't react immediately? Detachment gives you time. And time is power. It allows you to respond, not from panic, but from principle. You observe the manipulation, you recognize the script, and you choose your moment. Machiavelli, though often seen as ruthless, understood the value of restraint. In The Prince, he suggests that timing, not just strength, determines survival. A prudent man should always follow in the path trodden by great men and imitate those who have been supreme. In context, this is not about imitation in behavior, but in strategy. Great minds do not allow others to set the tempo. They control the rhythm of their choices. Practicing detachment means stepping back from the emotional theater. Before reacting, you pause. Before panicking, you verify. Before complying, you reflect. This doesn't make you cold, it makes you unreadable. And unreadable people are dangerous to those who rely on fear for control. Machiavelli was not a cynic. He was a realist. While others wrote about how people should behave, he wrote about how they actually do, when power pressures them, danger surrounds them, and fear whispers in their ear. And that's precisely why his thinking still matters. Because the world has changed, but human nature has not. The human mind is still shaped by fear. We still flinch at rejection, avoid confrontation, and cling to illusions of safety. The tools have evolved, swords became screens, kings became algorithms, but the mechanism remains. Fear is still the most reliable tool of control. And the ones who wield it best are those who make you believe they're protecting you while quietly making you dependent. That is why the 5 strategies inspired by Machiavelli are not just helpful, they're essential. Critical thinking is your first weapon. It cuts through noise, manipulations, and narratives designed to keep you docile. When you begin asking hard questions, who benefits, what's missing, where's the fear coming from, you step out of the illusion and reclaim authorship over your perception. Emotional resilience is your armor. The world will press on you, provoke you, unsettle you. But the person who can endure discomfort without collapsing becomes immune to emotional coercion. And once you stop fearing discomfort, you stop making weak deals just to escape it. Mastering the language of fear teaches you not to suppress fear, but to name it. Vague fear is a powerful master. Precise fear is a tool. When you articulate exactly what haunts you, you begin to dismantle its control, because you are no longer reacting blindly, but responding with clarity. Empathy is your counterweapon to division. It doesn't mean you agree with everyone. It means you see through the manufactured narratives that separate you from others. Machiavelli knew it was easier to rule a fragmented people, but a person who understands multiple perspectives cannot be easily manipulated by propaganda or tribal fear. Strategic detachment is your silence before the move. The world thrives on reaction, outrage, panic, instant compliance. But when you delay your response, observe instead of absorb, and move from principle rather than pressure, you become unreadable. And unreadable people cannot be controlled. Machiavelli didn't glorify cruelty, he respected clarity. He didn't reject morality, he questioned its performance. His philosophy was not about domination for its own sake, but about awareness, the ability to see how power works, how fear operates, and how most people unconsciously submit to both. In today's world of constant noise, curated panic, and subtle manipulation, seeing clearly is a revolutionary act. Fear governs those who fail to govern themselves. But when you understand fear, when you recognize how it distorts, divides, and dominates, you stop being its subject. You start using it. This is just the beginning. If this struck a nerve, if something in you wants to stop reacting and start leading, keep going. The next videos dive deeper into strategy, self-awareness, and the hidden mechanics of power. Because the more clearly you see, the harder you are to control. And that is the final lesson: fear is not the enemy. Blindness is.